Hi, and welcome to the ACSM Greater New York Chapter Podcast, Episode 1. I'm your host, James Jankowitz. And on today's podcast, we have two amazing women. We have Heidi Skolnik and Angela Mercurio. Heidi Skolnik is a sports nutritionist and has been part of the Women's Sports Medicine Center at the Hospital for Special Surgery for over 20 years. Considered a thought leader in nutrition, Heidi's company, Nutrition Conditioning, oversees the nutrition program at the Juilliard School and the School of American Ballet. Prior to that, Heidi served as the team nutritionist with the New York Knicks for 7 years, the Giants football team for 18 years, and the New York Mets for 15 years. It's quite a pedigree. Heidi earned 2 master's degrees, one in nutrition and the other in exercise physiology, and has authored 4 books. The latest, Athlete Triad Playbook, Relative Energy Deficiency in Sport. The link will be on the show notes. Filled with downloadable handouts for practitioners to use in their practice, helping athletes recover from low energy availability. As a sought-after presenter, Heidi presents internationally and is an expert resource for both print, online, and TV media. Heidi is a fellow with the American College of Sports Medicine. Angela Mercurio, a former Nebraska triple jumper who double majored in biochemistry and women's and gender studies, has been named the 2019 NCAA Woman of the Year. The Woman of the Year award was created in 1991 and recognizes graduating female student athletes who have distinguished themselves in athletics, academics, leadership, and community service. It's quite a prestigious award to win. Heidi and Angela met when, after Angela graduated from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, she became a research assistant with the Women's Sports Medicine Center. After talking through Angela's experience and what she had witnessed as a track and field athlete, they both decided to create this webinar. Angela is now a medical student at Harvard Medical School. We are thrilled she could join us in this webinar and share her invaluable experience and insight with all of us. So as we go into the webinar, the first question I asked the two of them was, what inspired you to put all this information together and create this course? This webinar is nothing short of a course, and it could be taught. And I would argue that maybe it could be taught as early as middle school and high school. It's full of a lot of valuable information, so sit back and relax, and I think you're going to be enlightened.
So it began when Angela had started her rotation with the Women's Sports Medicine Center, speaking with each of the professionals there. And when we sat and chatted and really discussed a little bit more in depth about her experience as an athlete, my work in the female athlete triad, and then really it kind of went from there as we discussed sort of broader issues and what coaches say and how it affects our self-esteem or how it affects our behavior and action, and kind of putting all of the dots together. We just came up with the idea, like, we got to share this. We got to really talk to coaches to help them understand the impact that they have on the athletes that they work with.
And Angela, this was driven by empirical experience on your part too?
Yeah, so as a track and field athlete, and like we'll get into later, track and field is one of the sports that can be really impacted by body image and eating disorders. And I had witnessed so many teammates and competitors and friends suffer from injuries and suffer from poor body satisfaction. And I also experienced how coaches can be implicated in that. And as an athlete, it was always hard to address your coach and be like, oh, please don't say that, or that made me uncomfortable. And you kind of just roll with it. And even if it is affecting you, you don't really speak up about it. So in talking to Heidi, it just seemed like a perfect opportunity to create a resource where coaches can hopefully realize, like, okay, some of these things that I'm saying or potentially not saying are having a negative impact on my athletes and ultimately a negative impact on their performance in the end. So yeah, it was a very personal experience on my part.
Gotcha. Well, I'm glad you guys took the initiative and the time to do it, and let's present it.
Well, first, I also just want to really thank the Greater New York ACSM chapter, because we are really thrilled to be part of this series that you're creating. So thanks for giving the shout out to us and inviting us to do it. Being a member since 1980. Today we're going to talk to you all about how to talk or not to talk to athletes about weight. In this presentation today, we're going to discuss why and how talking to athletes about weight matters, as it can negatively affect and influence how athletes see themselves and lead to underfueling, relative energy deficiency in sport, or the triad, and offer some suggestions, advice, and resources as well. So to begin with, how not to talk to athletes. You haven't missed any meals.
It must be hard to jump with those thunder thighs.
Are you sure you want to eat that ice cream?
That's a big hole you made in the sand.
You're so skinny. Eat a hamburger.
Fat doesn't fly.
You're looking good. And then squeezing some stomach skin.
You're probably slow because of that brownie you ate at dinner.
I hope you didn't overeat at Thanksgiving.
It looks like the freshman 15 hit you.
You're carrying too much weight. Now, these might seem a little extreme to you, and we did pick ones that, in fact, are perhaps a little bit more obvious, but I assure you that these are all very real quotes that I've either heard athletes come in and tell me that their coaches said this to them, or ones that Angela has heard her coaches say to her teammates at one time or another. And, you know, we understand that some of these may not have been said with malintent, but nonetheless, it's really beginning to help you hopefully understand how they may be received, not just how they're given. So, how to talk to athletes. You seem strong.
Good effort.
You picked up that correction quickly.
Great show of good sportsmanship.
In fact, you just don't need to say anything about weight. So again, although a coach feels that they want to be involved in everything that can help their athlete become a better athlete, when it comes to weight, that may not in fact be what ends up happening.
So we just suggested that coaches should avoid talking about weight, but why does it matter what a coach says? Well, in fact, what coaches say often has greater influence on their athletes than the athletes' parents, their friends, or even their physicians. Often, athletes are looking up to their coach and desiring their approval more than anyone else.
So what are some of the unintended consequences of what you say? Fat shaming, which is when you're criticizing someone for being overweight or making critical comments about their size. Fat shaming never helps anyone lose or manage weight in a healthy way. And so again, although it may appear like, oh, I'm just making fun, that the effect of that leads to someone feeling, instead of feeling very motivated and able to handle and do and be and change, they actually lose self-efficacy in the process.
Some further unintended consequences of fat shaming would be inducing shame in the athlete, making them just feel bad about themselves, leading them to inappropriate dieting or possibly triggering disordered eating or an eating disorder, which we will talk about later. This can also lead the athlete to distrust you as a coach and not value your opinion in the same way. And maybe most importantly, it can take the athlete further from focusing on their functional goals, which we will also talk about later.
So how does the athlete see herself? Well, certainly in developing athletes, and we're saying herself, but this is something that affects guys too, males as well. But you know, it's really to be determined, and that's again part of the point, is understanding the role you play in helping that young athlete develop and helping to direct them in what they want to focus on and what they want to think about. And as you'll see us put forth, we really want them to be thinking about functional goals and what they can do, not just what they look like. So body dissatisfaction is in fact a leading precursor to dieting, and dieting is a precursor to eating disorders.
So, like Heidi just said, dieting can definitely be a gateway to disordered eating, and we wanted to highlight that with some statistics. So, here we have that 30% of dieters may become pathological dieters, and 20 to 25% of them may develop an eating disorder. Another statistic is that girls may begin to be concerned that they are fat as young as the second grade. So, this would be 8 and 9-year-olds, and they may even say that they're on a diet. So this doesn't mean that they actually are on a diet, but it shows the pressure that girls feel from a young age to have some sort of ideal body. And you may be tempted to think that an athlete would be protected from this because they spend hours conditioning and training their bodies, but it's actually the opposite. Because athletes spend so much time working and focusing on their bodies, they can be more critical of their bodies and more inclined to do whatever it takes to achieve success in their sport.
So, how does body dissatisfaction lead to an eating disorder? Well, in an effort to reach the thin ideal or the thin athletic ideal, food selection patterns and habits often become unhealthy and lead to a preoccupation with weight and food. And then this also means that the athletes, instead of engaging in a healthy sports nutrition pattern of eating that will allow them to stay well fueled and see the benefits that can come from a healthy sports nutrition plan, they're going further and further away from that, hurting their performance and hurting their training outcomes. So what's the difference between eating disorder and disordered eating? Well, they differ in severity, frequency of thoughts, behaviors, symptoms, and outcomes. Food restriction, limiting food and food groups, rigid food patterns and rules. Foods are categorized as good and bad, moralizing eating, same foods every day, inadequate protein intake, chronic dieting, always on a diet, following different fads that are out there, skipping meals, excessive exercise, feeling compelled to do more than required in practice and conditioning. And obsessive thought patterns, body dissatisfaction. And, this is all not any one of these that goes on. It's a combination. It's the duration. It's the intensity. It's how much an athlete feels anxious around eating, food, isolation, and it takes them further and further away from engaging again in healthy practices that really can support them in their sports.
So here we have some more statistics on the prevalence of eating disorders in athletes. So a 2004 study revealed that the rates of eating disorders in female athletes ranged from 16 to 42% depending on the sport. So the bottom end of that 16% would be ball game sports, whereas the top range, the 42%, would be your aesthetic sports. So that would be gymnastics, dance, figure skating. And then somewhere in between those, you have the weight restricted sports like rowing and wrestling and the endurance sports like cross country running. From that, we then have the statistic that says 41.5% of high school athletes in aesthetic sports report disordered eating and were 8 times more likely to incur an injury.
So what and how are eating and injuries related? Well, the athlete triad is a syndrome of 3 interrelated conditions that exist on a continuum of severity. And it includes adequate fueling or inadequate fueling, hormonal health or hormonal dysfunction, and bone health, strong bones or bones that are more prone to stress fractures and not reaching peak bone mass. So the athlete triad is, in fact, again, along a continuum. It's optimal energy availability to low energy availability, optimal bone health, low bone mineral density, poor bone health, having regular healthy hormonal system and regular periods, menstrual irregularities, hormonal dysfunction to no period. So for females, it's not having a period for 3 months or longer, and in men, obviously, it's not as obvious to you. There's no outwardly way that they can necessarily just know, but there is depressed testosterone and poor sperm health. Males do seem to require maybe more severe restriction in their calories and can come out of it a little bit easier at this point, it seems, than females, even with in-day energy balance, and as little as 350 calories can make the difference of being in low energy availability, which is pretty incredible when you think about it.
So now we wanted to give you a little quiz, and we wanted to ask, by what age does peak bone mass happen? And the options are 1 to 10 years, 10 to 20 years, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, or 40 to 50. And we'll give you a couple seconds to think about that.
We need background music here, but I won't be the one to hum. And the answer is
20 to 30 years. So this is a major reason why it is so important for high school and early collegiate athletes to be adequately nourished and have balanced hormones, because those are the years of their peak bone development.
And when we're talking about bone health and bone density, just as a reminder that this is what healthy bone looks like versus osteoporotic bone. And we're not talking about just growing in length. We're talking about the geometry of the bone, the connection, all the architecture of the bone being strong, as well as the density of the bone. And again, athletes have only until their 20s and 30s to build their peak bone mass for life. And then that's what they're using, like the bone bank. That's what they're using for the rest of their life. So it's really crucial during this period of time that they're building the healthiest bones that they can. Relative energy deficiency in sport is an expansion of the triad. The triad lives within that, but it really begins to look at whether and how much other functions within other systems within the body are affected, and not yet as well researched as the triad, but it certainly is. The research is going on, and I know as a coach you care about those health systems, but you also care about the performance effects, and so we're looking at the effects that each of those systems impacted will have on performance, and that includes increased risk of injury, decreased training response, impaired judgment, decreased coordination, decreased concentration, irritability, sometimes hard to figure out in adolescence, I get it, but you got to know the athlete, depression, decreased glycogen stores, decreased muscle strength, and decreased endurance performance. So all of these systems can be impaired, or all of these outcomes can be affected by the different systems affected.
So to summarize that idea, adequate fueling is essential for top performance in ways that go so far beyond weight. It basically affects all of the symptoms as all of the pathways as Heidi just explained.
So sorry. Go ahead.
A story that highlights the points we are making is that of Mary Kane. Mary was a runner with the Nike Oregon Project, and she really was the fastest girl in America until she joined Nike. What happened to Mary was that she was in a very toxic training environment where her coach put all the emphasis on her eating behaviors and her body image, and she ended up suffering serious injuries and very early burnout because of it. So the point we want to make here is that coaches have lost many great athletes due to injury, stress, burnout, etc., because of inadequate fueling and because they place the emphasis on weight management and body type and not on fueling for performance. So what can you focus on as a coach instead of weight and body type? Well, you can focus on changing the narrative. And by this, we mean creating a culture of support, function, and goals. So some of these functional goals include speed, stamina, strength, strategy, skills, flexibility, sleep, recovery, and mental preparedness. These are all achievable and measurable goals that an athlete with any body type can strive for. I know for me as an athlete, it was so much easier to work towards taking 1 or 2 milliseconds off of my 30-meter time or spending more time on recovery or sleep than it was to think that I needed to lose 2 pounds to jump further. So the point we're trying to make here is to take the focus off of body type and put it onto some of these functional skills for improving performance.
So what can you do as a coach? You set the tone. You create the culture. You can create the culture that's supportive, that's healthy without judgment, that has your athletes striving for success, that focuses on skill building and self-efficacy and not just about sports-specific skills. You can talk about adequate fueling and nourishment. We know that many athletes actually don't even make that connection to know that how they eat will affect how they feel on the court or field or in the pool. Built-in hydration breaks, because it really shows how much it matters and that you care and prioritize that. And no fat talk, which we will circle back to this. Set realistic expectations for season, preseason, and for off-season, preseason, and season, because it will make a difference on athletes understanding sort of parameters around that. If you're saying, I want you to build your stamina, but you're not giving them sort of a plan of how to do that. I've had athletes who are just, pounding the pavement and putting overtraining in their effort to reach that goal.
An important part of changing the narrative in setting the tone on your team is being aware of differences amongst every athlete. So it's important to recognize that every athlete's body type is going to be very different due to genetics, weight history, their relationship to food, their culture, etc. For this reason, weight loss and gain should not be treated as a matter of personal character. So for example, saying if you had more discipline, your weight wouldn't be an issue, because often our body types are not directly within our control to change. Also, it's important to be aware of projecting one body type onto all athletes. So many athletes already compare themselves to professional athletes through social media or through televised sports, and they think that they need to look like them to succeed. So as a coach, you can encourage the diversity of different body types and emphasize that body type does not equal athletic success. The final point we want to make here is to be sensitive to food insecurity. So this can involve an athlete's access to food and their relationship to food because of it. So for example, maybe they grew up and they didn't have food readily available to them. So then when it does become available, they tend to eat more because they've witnessed that, or they've experienced that lack of food. So basically what we're getting across here is that it's important to be sensitive to the different environments that your athletes come from.
And with this, keeping in mind our times now, we really want to encourage you to think about COVID-19 and return to play. I'm sure you've listened to other webinars and are paying a lot of attention to this, but really ask and listen to what an athlete's experience has been coming back from this time. Everyone's living in a very different home. We don't know who has been affected, who in their family has been affected, both by the disease itself as well as financial ramifications. Reassure the athlete that you understand and will give them time, allow time for gradual return to playing weight and pre-COVID-19 conditioning level, and recognize that may, depending upon, if they had space, time, motivation, access to both food and to a way to condition, they may not be able to get that back within this season, but help them understand that you know that and you're giving them the time to reach those goals. So be careful to keep personal bias out of a conversation. Do not jump on the latest fad. There's plenty of misinformation available. You don't want to be the source of it. And what may be even right for you is not necessarily right for a young athlete out on the playing field. This still haunts me. The story of when the zone diet was very popular, and a 16-year-old runner came to me. Her coach had said to her entire team, "Eating a bagel is as bad as smoking a pack of cigarettes," and really instilled. And there was several young women on this team who ended up with pretty severe eating disorders, food fears and the ramifications of that. So, again, remembering that females are bombarded with dieting messages all the time from when they're young onward. And then it is layered on by type A personalities that tend to go into sports and their desire for perfection. So they're not bombarded with messaging about eating for energy. And in fact, there are sites out there that teach and encourage girls to embrace anorexia.
So what can you say if you are concerned that an athlete does have an eating disorder? Well, it's not just about what you say, but it's about how you say it.
So a non-judgmental approach and tone, emphasis on safety and support. And to Angela's point earlier on, hopefully you've had conversations already one-on-one where this isn't the first time you're going to talk to them or inquire about how they're doing and what's going on in their life. You want to approach it privately, not in front of other teammates. Avoid assumptions so that we don't really know when somebody has a change in their weight or performance for good or bad, what's going on and where that's coming from. Show concern, emphasize their well-being, and short and long-term health is of the most importance. Be prepared for defensiveness and objections, but still follow up in similar supportive manners. And this is really, really helpful because there's no way you can do it alone and the athlete can't do it alone. Try to have a team in place just for this reason or for other reasons that may come up to refer the athlete to so that you create a team approach to care. Having a primary care sports physician, a sports psychologist, and a sports dietitian that you can refer to support that athlete and to support you in supporting that athlete. When talking about weight, do act on your suspicions, even if an athlete is still performing well. A lot of coaches let runners who have lost weight keep running because they've improved their times. And there is this sort of little honeymoon period when an athlete might lose weight and be under fueling, but they are doing better. But I assure you that catches up with them and their performance will drop.
Don't assume everything is okay just because the athlete is achieving good results. Check in regularly with their mental and emotional health and avoid verbally associating their success with weight loss or body type. So for example, saying something like, "You've lost weight and I see your time has improved." That would be a verbal association of weight and performance.
Do be cautious of the initial peak in performance when an athlete loses weight. Understand that this may not be sustainable and may increase injury risk.
Don't avoid the warning signs. You may be inadvertently reinforcing a negative behavior by ignoring it.
So recognize that all injuries, illness, energy, and mood changes. Health concerns such as thyroid issues can cause weight fluctuations. Even though we created this, I will say there's a little caveat in here in that undereating can also throw off like thyroid issues. But the real point is that there can be other reasons for weight loss. So we do want to, or weight gain. So we do want to make sure not just assume that it's an eating issue, an eating disorder, but rather have a medical workup to really differentiate the diagnosis of what's going on.
And along those same lines, don't assume that weight loss means an eating disorder. For example, this could also, stress can cause changes in people's eating behaviors. Some can stress eat, and some may have a loss of appetite. The athlete may need support to learn skills to best handle their stress, and an easy way to avoid some of these problems would be to just check in with your athletes, see, do they have an exam coming up? Are they having issues with their family, with their friends, anything like that could possibly cause them stress.
So what is fat talk exactly? We said we'd circle back to this, and I think it's something that when you hear it, you'll know it. It's conversations that enforce weight loss, an ideal body, or dissatisfaction with body image. 93% of college women engage in fat talk, and those who engage in fat talk, even if they are thin, often have the greatest dissatisfaction with their bodies. So let's give some examples. Does this make my butt look fat?
Oh, I hate my love handles.
I can't believe she's wearing that.
I used to be a size 0 and now I'm a size 3. I need to lose weight.
I wish I had a thigh gap.
She is way too big to play this position.
Do you recognize hearing any of this? Or perhaps engaging in this kind of talk? So fat talk may seem reassuring at first. Friend one, ugh, I feel so fat.
OMG, are you serious? You are so not fat.
Yes, I am. Look at my thighs.
Look at my thighs.
Oh, come on, you're a stick.
So are you.
So fat talk is actually not helpful. Fat talk simply serves to reinforce the thin body ideal and the notion that disliking one's body is normative for women. Women come to expect this type of talk from their peers and likely to feel pressured to engage in it. Constant reminders that one's normal weight or underweight friends also feel fat may not actually be helpful in the long run. And again, it's the focus on how we look, not on what we are doing or achieving.
So another consideration that we want to highlight is the use of weigh-ins. So if you regularly weigh your athletes, it's crucial to have a plan about what you're going to do with the information, why you are collecting it, and how you will explain assessments individually. We definitely recommend that the results of weigh-ins are not shared publicly and not used to compare athletes' body types with each other, because this can induce shame and it can lead to athletes comparing themselves with teammates and competitors. In my personal experience, we had to weigh ourselves bi-weekly, and we had to announce our weight in front of our team so that our trainer could write it down. So I don't think the intention of this was for us to compare ourselves to each other, but that was one of the inevitable consequences because we were always saying out loud how much we weighed and then hearing what our teammates weighed. Also, this constant weigh-in cycle creates a slight obsession with weight. So you spend that day thinking, did I eat too much before I weighed in? Did I not eat enough? Did I lose weight? Did I gain weight? And you immediately take that focus off of your functional goals and you put it onto your weight because you know you're going to be weighed later that day or later that week. Another consequence of this, sharing weight publicly, is that you have athletes in different positions comparing their weights, which makes absolutely no sense because they have different functional goals completely. So, for example, you wouldn't need a sprinter and a thrower to look alike in any way, or you wouldn't need a goalie and a forward to compare themselves. But this is a consequence of weighing publicly.
So this is a new model that's still being worked on, but I think is a really great one to share. And it's sort of understanding the different athlete development stage and the nutritional skills as it relates to even body composition measuring and whether it makes sense to even be doing them. So to think about developing athletes, there's emerging body composition assessment concepts. So you don't actually need to take their body composition other than for optimal growth progressions. And there doesn't need to be a focus on body composition for performance outcomes. You're really into a foundational application of nutrition. Then in the national collegiate level, developing body composition concepts, limited focus on body composition assessment and discussions, and only from a health perspective, and also recognizing there's a big difference from, let's say, an incoming freshman and a graduating senior. So really recognizing when and if and what the benefit might in fact be. And then for elite professional level, even then, body composition may be very helpful in assessment and with periodized approach, but only with mature athletes and those with positive self-image who will use the information in a constructive way. I just want to go back and say one comment from the last slide, which is, for instance, you may be doing body weight for hydration purposes, to be measuring what's going on with hydration. And that's a very valid reason to be weighing. But in that case, the trainer could be doing it. The athlete doesn't necessarily, could be blind weights. The athlete doesn't really even need to hear what the weight is. They just need to understand how it may affect what their action should be around hydration. And we'll kind of cover that as we move forward a little bit more in terms of what to do with the information. So to understand how to talk about body composition matters because it can still be misused, misunderstood, and obsessed over. You know, it is a much better measurement than weight for helping an athlete understand what their body the potential of what their body composition is, but maintain a similar protocol to weighing. It should be private. Do not publish the results publicly. Determine who even sees the results, and use this part of the information with strength and conditioning or medical team for goal setting purposes. So it does help for the athlete to understand that the weight that they see on the scale doesn't reflect the amount of muscle they have or speak to their fitness level or skills. Knowing body composition can be a really useful tool in helping to establish realistic weight goals. And I use that in my practice often when I have athletes coming in with very unrealistic goals to reach, and they're already, they already have developed a musculature that to lose that weight, they'd have to lose so much muscle. It makes no sense. They've picked this ideal weight in their head that doesn't match where they are conditioning wise. And so it helps to shift the focus from weight to strength and conditioning. But remember that it's still one data point amongst many. So speed, strength, stamina, reaction time, flexibility, how does that relate to where their body composition is? Does changing their body composition, I've worked with athletes who, in order to reach a certain weight, would have to undereat, and it would hurt their stamina or their strength training. It makes no sense. So the importance of it, I think sometimes there's an emphasis on it that outshines its actual importance. So it does help turn the focus from immediate daily weighing to training over time. It takes weeks, months to build muscle, and that way can be sort of helpful and constructive.
With this slide, we wanted to highlight the importance of uniforms in contributing to an athlete's body satisfaction. This is especially true for younger athletes, maybe middle school and high school level, because they're in a period of growing their self-consciousness and learning how to be comfortable in their changing bodies. So it's very important that athletes feel comfortable in their uniform, especially since they'll most likely be performing in front of spectators and other people. So extra precaution might need to be made on the uniform styles, especially for women uniforms, which we'll highlight further on the next slide. But also to make sure that as a coach, you aren't directly commenting on how your athletes look in their uniforms, because they already may be self-conscious in this area. So this photo series here is from NBC News, and really it just shows that just how common the differences are between male and female uniforms. So as you can see, the women uniforms tend to be more revealing and show more skin, and this can definitely influence how comfortable an athlete feels while wearing her or his uniform.
So how does the athlete see herself? We just want to remind you that what you say and how you say it does in fact matter. Sports nutrition can do many things. It can help prevent dehydration, enhance concentration, helps to maintain healthy immune function, reduces the potential for injury, enables you to train longer and harder, delays the onset of fatigue, promotes optimal recovery and adaptation to your workouts, improves body composition and strength. These are all wonderful things that it can do. It goes well beyond weight. So often when athletes think about nutrition, they think about weight, but to understand it's so much more than that. Build a team, have a treatment team of trusted professionals who are all dedicated to making sure the athlete is safe and healthy. That includes a medical doctor, a sports nutritionist, a therapist, one who knows sports and eating disorders, strength and conditioning coach. But that also might include, an RA. It might include a nurse. It might include a physical therapist. It might include an athletic trainer. And so you need to determine based on your environment what that team really would look like. But make yourself comfortable referring your athletes to experts who can really help them to get healthy.
So in final summary, with this presentation, we really wanted to encourage you to create a positive body image culture and to be the model who sets that culture for your team. And you can do this with a focus on function and not on weight, helping your athletes understand that the connection between food and fuel is positive, avoiding fat talk, and creating positive body image culture through words, and using body composition, if at all, as just one data point out of many. So in final summary, sports nutrition is a strategy for better performance and not just for weight loss.
So we just wanted to put this up here. This is NEDA, which is the National Eating Disorder Association. It is a national association. If anyone listening does need to find help for an athlete that they're working with, this is a good place to start to put you in touch with some resources. I am going to give a shameless plug for my new Athlete Triad Playbook Reds. I think it can be a great toolkit for practitioners to help them in helping their athletes understand this connection between low energy availability and their health and well-being. This is just a list of references that we used within our talk, and we will open up to some questions now. So thank you.
That was amazing. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, just turned off my mic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. My first question, actually, Angela, would be to you. I'm just thinking now as I'm listening to all this, you're just out of college, right? So in the pantheon of your college experience, your athletic training, your classes, your coaching, all of that, is any of this addressed as a student goes through their college experience? Like, you obviously put this together because you felt that there was a need for this, but within the current college experience, do people talk about this?
Yeah, that's a great question. A little anecdote I'll throw in so that might help answer that is Heidi mentioned that story about the 16-year-old who said she didn't eat a bagel because she thought it was as bad as a pack of cigarettes. And I honestly didn't eat a bagel for years because I just thought it was so bad for, like, I would just run so slow or I wouldn't jump as far if I ate it. So I didn't eat one until I graduated college after like many years. So if that should probably answer your question, that no, it's not addressed nearly enough. And honestly, it probably took me graduating, even seeing friends go through so many injuries, stress fractures, having to quit their sport, some with like irreparable injuries, even to this day. And even then, I still wasn't making the connection between what am I eating and is this affecting my body. But upon graduating, definitely working with Heidi, talking to different doctors and other sports medicine doctors I've talked to since then, I've realized it's so clear, like the connection is so clear, but when you're in it, I think it goes to the idea of like, you're desperate to succeed and you'll do anything to get there. And if you don't have someone properly educating you on that, you're going to just jump to the conclusion of, okay, well, this athlete looks like this and she's good, so I want to look like her. And I think that's such an easy trap to fall into, especially without the like proactive education that we do not receive.
And it's more challenging when you're young, like you, because you're so resilient and you recover quickly. So you don't really have to face the consequences like the next day, for example, right? So let me ask you this question. Where do you feel it should be taught then? Do you feel this is the realm of somebody like Heidi to create a class? Should this be the realm of a sports psychologist to step in and teach this? Like, where do you feel this fits?
Honestly, I think this fits with our entire presentation, that the coaches need to know what is going on. I do not believe that, at least the majority of coaches I've encountered, that they understand these connections very well. And like we mentioned at the beginning, the coach has such a vast impact on us. And it's like a lot of athletes go to psychologists to recover from what their coaches have said to them. So it's like, if we can get the problem where it started, then maybe you go to a psychologist for other reasons. So I really do think that it's important that coaches get this information, and this can start early, like middle school, high school, before bad habits are ingrained.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I've been an athlete my whole life, and I've had great coaches and really bad coaches, and they're like a priest to you at some point. They say the wrong thing, and you're riddled with this feeling that traces you for the rest of your life if you're not careful. So Heidi, so like, where do you feel this sets in? I mean, what you guys are presenting would make a great college course, right? If you guys were to actually assemble this and make it a required course for athletes or any student, really.
You know, it's interesting because I've been talking to a lot of female athletes in particular as I launched the playbook, and so many mirror Angela's experience of being these really bright, ambitious young women who never heard of it until they were on the other side of it, got diagnosed with it. And you could see the aha, and then they see themselves. And I asked them, if anyone had told you, would you have listened anyway? Right? Because you're young and you're going for a goal. And so that is, again, to Angela's point, where I think that what I'm going to do a cheer out to the coaches who are listening. You're educating, you're learning this. There are things you can do. You don't have to be an expert in nutrition. You have to set the tone that even by saying something like, did you eat breakfast today? Did you have a snack before you came to practice? You don't have to know what to tell them to eat. You just have to not tell them what not to eat, right? Like, you don't have to be the expert. You have to set the tone that I value that you are going to nourish yourself and fuel yourself, right? I value you as the athlete you are in the body you have, and not ask them to change their body. There's no evidence that being thinner makes you be a better athlete. That is false narrative right there. So I do think that there are college courses for nutrition, and sometimes this is included or this isn't. And I do think that athletes, there's life skills that they have to get when they go in college. So sure, but and I can't tell you how many times I see these young athletes who are excelling in junior year because they want to get recruited for college. They get recruited, and by their sophomore year, they are sidelined and riddled with stress fractures, and they don't heal from it, and then their career's over. So it is high school. I mean, it's great in college too, but it does start before. And I personally think, I don't know how much time we got. I don't want to take the whole, it gets into political. If for females, it's also like, when you're on the bus coming back and you're talking about who looked like what in your skirt versus who made the goal and how great were they on the field, like, that's not what the guys are talking about. Now, I don't want, guys also have pressures, a lot of body dysmorphia, trying to get bigger versus being happy in the body that they have. There are eating disorders for even, there's layers to it. But I think that it has to start earlier, and it's not always about nutrition. It is also about self-esteem, attitude, standing up for yourself, focusing on what you accomplish. Like, it's a little bit more complicated than just food. And I do want to say to coaches, you can be a positive factor. I don't want to say the same way it's not a parent's fault. Eating disorders in particular are a perfect storm coming together, right? So where a comment can trigger it, but it's not like your fault, right? But repeated body shaming is bullying, basically, And so I do think becoming aware can help you change your how you talk and what you say, and more importantly, what you focus on.
And how much of fat talk is actually done through social media now? Is that a thing? Is that a big thing? Angela, maybe you know more about that too.
Yeah, I definitely think that. Well, I think social media heightens all of the body dissatisfaction. I think it's so easy to just first of all, most of the pictures are edited. So when you do see someone with the thigh gap or with the, perfect figure, quote unquote, you might assume that's what you should look like. But in reality, they're not real pictures often. And I think that can lead to I want to look like her, or oh, she's so skinny. And those are also forms of fat talk in a way, because you're focusing just on, that outward body image. So I personally feel like I did grow up into being an athlete as social media was evolving. And I feel honestly a little bit blessed that I got the tail end of my athletic careers when social media was really popular, because I can only imagine now there's an extra pressure for young girls coming up as athletes now and being bombarded with images of not only athletes, but also girls who aren't athletes and wanting to look like them too. So yeah, I think that it's definitely heightens a lot of the issues that we're talking about.
Right.
And I think, to the point of education again, that's where teaching media literacy is really helpful. Again, it's connecting things that you don't think, how does media literacy prevent poor eating habits, or going down eating disorders, but it's helping them see that there's clickbait, that headline isn't actually what the facts are, or that's been photoshopped, or I call it food porn, all the pictures of beautiful food. That's not how most people eat, or buying into someone. Like, there was just this great example, I think it was on TikTok, where they showed women who were giving like this advice, and then their boyfriend's reactions, and they did this on and so there was this woman going, I've been on this 30-day regime, like I cut out all sugar, and the boyfriend's going, and then she's like, and no alcohol, and there's a glass right there of wine, and then she goes, and I've been getting up at 6:30 to exercise, and I know it seems like a sacrifice, but it's so worth it. And he just goes, so like, not to believe that that's actually what a lot of people are doing, and there are people who have a thigh gap for real. It's not Photoshop. So what? That's not what made him a great athlete, or they may not even be an athlete. They might not even exercise. That's their body type. So what? Like, yeah.
Do we have any evidence how much this impacts? Obviously, it impacts women, but what about men, young boys? To what extent is that?
I don't know that we have adequate facts on it, because I think that, like many things, it's underdiagnosed. Men are more, and boys are more reluctant to come forward and to share. There's a lot of shame around it to begin with for either gender. So I don't think that we totally know yet. I think the research, so much in medicine is male focused, and we're still catching up on getting, understanding the differences for the female body. But in this one area, our emphasis on the female athlete is a little more advanced than understanding the ramifications and on the male body, and also just the prevalence of it. And differentiating, eating disorders come in a lot of different shapes, forms, and it can be it doesn't have to be an eating disorder. It can be disordered eating you don't have to wait till it becomes more severe. It can be very debilitating to have disordered eating. And so that's the other thing. You don't have to wait till it's so severe to get help.
Right.
And I want to add anecdotally, when I was referencing teammates, that included both male and female teammates that I've witnessed go through some of these cycles, as well as friends I have in other sports, weight class sports, and other like the male aesthetic sports such as gymnastics. So this is anecdotal. This isn't like statistical evidence, but I've definitely seen it with friends on both male and female.
So again, the high risk sports are the ones that are judged. So diving, gymnastics, dance, cheer, and then obviously like jockey and wrestling, and there's weight class ones, but even ones like I think more of the ones were individual, so runners and cyclists as opposed to team sports. But that protection, I think, has become less so a factor as time goes on, because of the prevalence of all of society being so visually driven. And so I think that's less so. Like, why, there's certain sports where you would never think that it would affect, more like softball, or, because both of what they wear and the different body types. But now it's even in, field hockey and lacrosse, and I don't think anyone is protected per se.
How do we try to inform a coach when it's time, when the coach is at a threshold, and the coach now should bring the athlete to a sports psychologist or to get further help? Like, is the coach trained at all to understand where that fine line is?
No.
In your experience? Yeah.
And I feel for them, because I think it's a really hard conversation. I think it's not one, I'm going to just tell you stories that I've heard from different clients that have come in, or different podcasts and webinars that are going on. Like, I just listened to one a few weeks ago, and these female athletes were saying, this one female athlete said, I had this incredible coach, and he called me in with my parents. And this was somebody who was already sort of destined for really a competitive level. And the coach talked to her parents and her and said, you're going to get your period and your body's going to change, and I understand that and I accept that, and you're going to still excel, but there's going to be a period of time where you might lose some coordination or some strength, and we'll work a little bit more on skills, or we're just going to keep conditioning through it, and you're going to get to the other side and you're going to still be able to excel. But I want you to know ahead of time, so you're not scared or think that I'm judging you, and know that I know, and this is all part of it. Like, wow.
That's phenomenal.
Like, wow. So, yeah, so I think coaches need more modeling of how it can be done. And it's a tricky conversation. To Angela's point, though, it can't be the only conversation you had. Like you said, you know, you've had coaches that have been really positive in your life, and you've ones that you're still trying to get over it.
I'm still shaking it off, yeah.
Yeah, and I've seen it. I actually, you know, I never reached that competitive level. I played 3 sports in high school, but I didn't play past that, so I don't think it affected me. I was a Title IX baby, so for me, beneficiary, I should say, really, not, you know, so for me, like, it was all positive. But I still had my son go through it, and it is so great and vast, the difference. And right, that positive impact you have, and every coach wants to have a positive impact. So why doesn't every coach have a positive impact? So I don't think we can unpack that here. I think that what every coach can do is at least become aware of what they don't know, don't overstep their boundaries, surround themselves then with those who can help in the area they don't know. So even if they have a concern that, for example, somebody has an eating disorder and they're not comfortable, if they have the right team around them, they can ask for advice from that sports nutrition or sports psychologist. I have a player, I think they're in trouble. How should I handle it? And they can get coached on how to then interact with that athlete. They don't have to have every skill.
Right.
They're not a nutritionist. They're not a sports psychologist.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
They're right at the intersection of all those disciplines.
Of all those things, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is a heck of a responsibility for somebody who's a master of none of those.
It is a huge responsibility. And coaches, you know, like, again, this is not coach bashing. There's so many, if you're listening to this, yay, right? You're open and you're trying to learn. We all learn, we're all evolving in our careers. I handle things differently than I did in the beginning of my career. I've learned, I've evolved. That's what it's about. So, I don't think anyone goes in with the intent to harm. It's
of course
just,
not.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on that answer just briefly, but yeah, and I also wanted to reiterate that even my earlier comment, like about, coaches may be triggering an athlete to go to see a sports psychologist. I don't mean to coach bash either. I think like every single coach I've had has like changed my life in some way. But that can still coexist with, making those occasional harmful comments. So you can be an amazing coach, an amazing person, literally change my life, have a place in my heart. But there's still a couple comments that I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. But those two things can definitely coexist. And then to answer your other question about what can a coach do, I think kind of what Heidi was getting at is like being proactive about it. So even if it's something as simple as the first meeting of the season, just bringing it up, like, this is a real thing. Fueling is important, and if you have any problems, like, these are the resources. It doesn't have to be super detailed, it doesn't have to be intense, but opening that up proactively before you suspect that an athlete might be at risk, or, that's part of setting the tone, would be setting the tone before it becomes a problem. So that would probably be my recommendation, is make that a part of like your preseason meeting. Just bring it up.
Right. Yeah, you can never go wrong with open and honest discussion. And it just sounds like if we were to put a curriculum together, this should actually start in high school or maybe even middle school, where you can pull all these disciplines in one class, and talk about the life cycle and the growth cycle and what to expect and how it relates to an athlete. And, it's just so many moving parts here. And that's why I feel for the athlete, because it's sort of incumbent upon them to search out all these different areas to try to figure this whole thing out. Right.
Well, again,
and that can be tough to do.
We're sort of going to, we're having sort of parallel discussions, right? Because, we're talking about disordered eating or eating disorder. We're talking about fueling and sports nutrition. There's a lot of different things going on. Eating disorders exist in the larger population. What's shocking is that it actually exists in perhaps a greater amount in the sporting world, right? Because you would think that athletes, the presumption I think is that athletes would be immune, because they do train and they do have these great bodies and they are, they can eat whatever they want because they're training. There's a presumption that it doesn't exist, and it's the wrong presumption.
And Heidi, tell me about your new book, The Athlete Triad Playbook. You just wrote, you just finished that recently?
Yeah, I just finished it, so thanks for giving me an opportunity.
Yeah, no, please, because it sounds like a tool that would help
Right.
most coaches in this predicament.
And that's what it really is. It's a toolkit. It's 40 different downloadable handouts that range from topics from what is the triad, what is REDS, what is the difference between disordered eating and eating disorder, sort of a lot of things we touched. There's nutrients in there from calcium and vitamin D and magnesium, all the pertinent nutrients. There's another section on sports nutrition and a few different handouts there, and then another section on interactive activities. So it's really developed for practitioners to use as a tool to help them in their practice treating those with low energy availability. But I think anybody can use it to understand, because they're easy to read handouts. Anybody who's in the field can use it to better educate themselves and or even use it as educational handouts for their players. They might not do the interactives with them. They're not going to be doing the actual counseling. Then they're using it as information pieces.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So you just saw that gap and you're like, let me fill this up. Let me, share my own experience and provide this for people who I know are missing this information.
Yeah. I mean, I went last year at one of the conferences. I went to a nutrition conference. I've been doing this again. Like I remember hearing about the female athlete triad when Dr. Barbara Drinkwater introduced this concept in the 80s at the National American College of Sports Medicine annual meeting. And I've been with the Women's Sports Medicine Center for 25 years. And so I've been doing this work for that long. Of course, again, the field has evolved and the research has gotten, deeper and more abundant. But when I went to this conference and every single session that was on this topic was packed with dietitians who were like hearing about it for the first time or hungry for this information, I just realized, like, here we are talking about it, and there's so many people who don't know. I take for granted because I've been doing it for so long, and then I realized I have some information to share that others can really benefit from. So yeah, well, I'm going to put it together and put it out there.
Well, thanks for that. I look forward to checking it out. So I think we're wrapping it up now. So I will leave the floor to both you, Heidi and Angela. Are there any final comments you'd like to share to the general audience, to athletes, to coaches?
I just want to thank everyone who is listening, because they're educating themselves, and that alone, the ability to say I don't know, and the ability to now be more sensitive around the topic and to be able to talk about it, destigmatize it, to recognize that we are more than what we weigh. Our weight doesn't define us as athletes or as people. The minute you make that shift, that alone is great strides toward focusing on function.
That's very well put. Yeah, we're more than what we weigh. That's awesome.
I want to echo Heidi and just shout out the coaches that are listening and anyone who's listening, and because it does show that you desire to be a better support, a better coach, a better, even a parent could benefit from this information, just better for the younger person, the athlete, whoever it is that you care about, and you're helping to, reach their potential. So just a quick shout out, and your efforts will not go unnoticed.
I'm going to add to that. I'm going to ask
okay.
You know what? Because we're now focusing on the coaches, but when I think of the ACSM audience and how many personal trainers are there and athletic trainers are there, and I hear personal trainers all the time. Some again who get it and they're helping their clients focus on function, and there are those who are still saying, got to get that bikini bod, or talking to them. I hear them saying, "You ate French fries." Like, you don't want to eat French fries. Well, that's not true. They can eat, people can eat French fries, right? So, it's not just coaches. It's prevalent. It oozes into so many different practices that we all can be more thoughtful about what messages we're sending and the ways in which we food shame and body shame.
And that term coach has become so flexible, throughout the decades. You have financial coaches, you have life coaches, you have coaches in every capacity. So it's almost taken on a whole new responsibility, and I sometimes I wish there were courses that were taught in school that just teach you how to coach, like the whole psychology.
By the way, there is. There's a coaching certification you can get. There's like life coaching, and there are courses you can reach out for that.
Right.
So.
All right. Well,
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Did you say something, Angela? No? Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you, ladies, so much for sharing your time and your expertise and your experience on our first official podcast for the ACSM Greater New York chapter. And I look forward to catching up with you guys in the future, and I look forward to checking out your new book.
Thank you so much.